3 times. That's how many times the Reserve Bank of Australia has raised interest rates in 2026. And yesterday, May 5th, they did it again. The cash rate is now sitting at 4.35%. That's the highest it has been in over a decade. And the worst part? The RBA is openly warning that it might not be done yet. If you have a mortgage, this affects you directly. If you rent, this affects you too. And if you're hoping that relief is just around the corner today, we need to have an honest conversation about what the RBA is actually telling us. Yesterday's decision was not a surprise to economists, but it was deeply unwelcome to millions of Australians who are already stretched to their limits. The RBA board voted to increase the official cash rate by 0.25 percentage points, from 4.10% to 4.35%. That takes the cumulative increase since 2022 to more than 4.25 percentage points, from near zero in the space of about 4 years to 4.35. In the statement released after the decision, the RBA board gave Australians very little comfort. It said that inflation is likely to remain above target for some time. It warned of second-round effects from higher fuel prices, meaning that the cost of energy doesn't just hit petrol prices. It flows through into the price of everything else. And it said the board is focused on doing what it considers necessary to bring inflation under control. That last phrase, doing what it considers necessary, is the RBA's way of saying there may be more to come. And several major economists think there will be. Here's what this means in actual dollar terms for ordinary Australians. If you have a $600,000 variable rate mortgage, which is increasingly the norm in Sydney and Melbourne, given where property prices have been, yesterday's 0.25% increase adds roughly $95 a month to your repayments. On its own, that doesn't sound catastrophic. But this is the third increase this year alone. And when you add it to the cumulative effect of every rise since 2022, someone who took out a $600,000 mortgage when rates were near zero is now paying somewhere between $1,400 and $1,600 more per month than they were 3 years ago. Every month, on top of grocery bills that are higher, on top of energy bills that are higher, on top of rent that is higher for anyone who doesn't own. Within hours of the RBA's announcement, the major banks confirmed they would be passing the increase on in full. One of the big 4 banks confirmed on its website that variable home loan rates would increase by 0.25%, effective May 22. The others followed quickly. There was no delay, no partial absorption. The full increase passed straight to customers. So why is the RBA doing this? Because it genuinely feels like punishment. The RBA's job, written into its mandate, is to keep inflation within a target band of 2 to 3% annually. Right now, inflation is sitting well above that. The latest figures put underlying inflation at around 4%. That's not catastrophically high by global standards, but it's persistently above where the RBA needs it to be. The RBA's statement yesterday specifically called out 2 drivers. First, capacity pressures in the economy, meaning that demand for goods and services is still running faster than the economy can supply them, which pushes prices up. Second, the fuel price shock from the Iran war, disruption to the Strait of Hormuz, which is feeding through into higher prices for transport, logistics, food, and manufacturing. The theory behind raising rates is that when borrowing becomes more expensive, people spend less. Less spending means less demand. Less demand means prices stop rising as fast. Inflation comes down, eventually. The problem is that theory works much better when inflation is being driven by excessive consumer spending, when inflation is being driven by fuel prices, supply chain disruptions, and housing costs. Things people cannot simply choose to stop spending on. Raising rates is a blunt instrument that causes significant pain, without necessarily fixing the underlying problem. Critics of the RBA's approach have been making this point loudly. The Australia Institute's chief economist Greg Jericho said this week that the rate rise will push more Australians into mortgage stress, without actually fixing the supply-side causes of inflation. He called it a policy mistake. And then there's the political dimension, because in an election year, everything has a political dimension. Opposition Treasury spokesperson Tim Wilson was quick to respond to yesterday's decision, placing blame squarely on the Labor government. He said the government needed to stop the spending binge, stop borrowing debt, and stop pouring petrol on the inflation fire. The government's response was more measured. Treasurer Jim Chalmers acknowledged the decision was difficult for Australian families, but defended the government's fiscal approach, arguing that Labor's spending had been targeted and responsible, and that the inflation driving yesterday's rate rise was substantially a global phenomenon. Iran war, energy prices, global supply chains, not a domestic policy failure. Both sides are partly right and partly wrong, which is how it usually goes. Government spending does contribute to inflation, but so do global oil prices and housing supply shortfalls that no government has adequately addressed. Australians are going to have to decide, at the ballot box, which explanation they find more convincing. Here's the part that should genuinely worry people. Westpac, one of Australia's big four banks, is now forecasting 2 more rate rises this year. A 0.25% increase in June, and another 0.25% in August. If Westpac is right, the cash rate will hit 4.85% by August. That would be the highest official rate since 2008, the year of the global financial crisis. The RBA Shadow Board, a group of leading economists who track RBA decisions, put a 70% probability on rates needing to go higher over the next 6 months. That is not a fringe view. That is the mainstream economic forecast right now. What that means practically: if you are on a variable rate mortgage, do not plan your finances around rates coming down anytime soon. They may stay where they are. They may go higher. The first rate cut, whenever it comes, is likely to be well into 2027 at the earliest, based on current projections. So what can you actually do right now? First, if you haven't already, call your bank and ask about your options. Some lenders will negotiate a lower rate for existing customers, particularly if you have a good repayment history or significant equity. It's worth a phone call. Second, if you're on a variable rate and you're worried, talk to a mortgage broker about whether fixing part of your loan makes sense for your situation. Fixing rates right now is not automatically the right answer. Fixed rates are already priced with future rises factored in, but it's worth getting personalized advice. Third, review your budget now, before May 22nd when the increase hits. Work out what the extra monthly repayment means for your cash flow. If it's going to be tight, better to know now and adjust than to be caught short. Fourth, if you're renting, be aware that landlord mortgage cost increases typically flow through to rent reviews. The rental market is already critically tight. Another round of rate rises is unlikely to ease that pressure. Here's the bottom line. Australia's cost of living crisis is not easing. 3 rate rises in 2026. A fuel shock from the Iran war, grocery bills at record highs, rents that continue to climb. Australians are being squeezed from every direction simultaneously. The RBA is doing what it believes it has to do. Reasonable economists disagree about whether it's the right approach, but the debate about monetary policy theory is cold comfort to a family sitting around the table, working out how to cover a mortgage payment that just went up for the 3rd time this year. We covered this story back in April when the second rise hit. At that point, a lot of people thought surely that's it. Surely they'll hold now. Yesterday's decision showed that the RBA is not done, and the forecast suggests it may not be done after this either. If you're feeling the pressure from this, you are not alone. And the question of whether the people making these decisions truly understand the impact on ordinary Australians, that's a conversation worth having. Has this rate rise hit you directly? Are you redoing your budget tonight because of yesterday's decision? Drop it in the comments. I want to hear what this actually looks like from where you're sitting. Like and subscribe for more Australian news explained simply. See you next time.